And here's a top focus story at this hour. In the midst of a raging controversy over India's economic growth under the new GDP series, former Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramanian has said that India is grossly overestimating its GDP growth. Mr. Subramanian claims that while official estimates have pegged average annual growth at around 7% during this period, the actual GDP growth is likely to have been lower at around 4.5%. So startling disclosures being made by former Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramanian, who believes India's average annual growth between the years 2011 and 2012 and 2016 and 2017 may have been overestimated by as much as 2.5 percentage points. Now, in a new research paper that he made public this morning, Mr. Arvind Subramanian has pointed out that instead of the reported growth of 6.9 between 2011 and 2016, the actual growth was more likely to have been between 3.5 and 5.5%. So clearly he's talking about key methodological change in the way India computes and calculates its GDP. He's also talking about inflated figures, which are far from the actual statistics. Sanjana Chauhan joining me on the phone line. Sanjana, first just sticking to the anomalies that Arvind Subramanian has pointed out. What exactly has he said about the GDP growth figures, and how does he derive these, these differences that he has detected between the actual growth rate and what the government has quoted?
Right, Afrida. So let me just take you through what exactly has happened. Arvind Subramanian today made his research paper public, and in this research paper, he basically spoke about post-global financial crisis, about the heady narrative of a guns-blazing India, obviously pointing to what happened in Pulwama and Balakot. That also spoke about statisticians, talking about how India may have actually ceded to a more realistic one of an economy growing solidly, but that is actually not the case. So just to give you a background, the government, let's remember, sometime in May had said that India's growth rate in GDP had declined to 5.8 in the last quarter of the financial year 2018 and 19. This was the slowest pace of growth in 17 quarters. And the ministry also revised the GDP growth. Let's remember that was a major bone of contention because the ministry revised the GDP growth for 2018 to 19 to 6.8% from the earlier estimated 7%. So this new analysis, this research paper that has been made public today, is based on 17 economic indicators for the period of 2001 to 2017 and 18 that are correlated with GDP. But it does not include the database which forms an integral part of the Central Statistics Office calculation.
Okay, Mr. Akash Jindal, economist, joining me on the phone line. Good morning, Mr. Jindal. I want to ask you about this research paper that Mr. Arvind Subramanian, who is a former Chief Economic Advisor, has come out with, claiming that there are serious anomalies in the figures quoted by the government, and he gives us a very detailed report on the evidences that he has to prove his claims.
Organizations, international organizations who have done surveys on GDP, and the GDP predictions they have given us are around, they have been around 7%, and they are almost quite close to the estimates which are
Okay, I'm afraid we have some disturbance in the audio link there with Mr. Akash Jindal. We'll try and fix that. But economists like Mr. Jindal and others would like, of course, to comment on this, because this is a very big development coming from none other than the former Chief Economic Advisor. So coming from the stature of Mr. Arvind Subramanian, this would raise questions whether there were figures inflated, whether the computation and the calculation was done in an erroneous manner, because what Mr. Arvind Subramanian comes out with is a detailed research paper saying that India's average annual growth between 2011 and 2012 and 2016 and 2017 may have been overestimated by about 2.5 percentage points. Now, why he says so? He gives us the detailed parameters that the computation should have been based on. He comes up with evidences, and in fact, if I can quote the particular report, he says a variety of evidence within India and across countries suggests that India's GDP growth has been overstated by about 2.5 percentage points per year in the post-2011 period, with a 95% confidence band of 1 percentage point. Now, that is the exact statement made by the former Chief Economic Advisor. The paper, in fact, traces part of the overestimation to a key methodological change in the way India calculated GDP, the measurement of the formal manufacturing sector. So this is an important takeaway from this report, because what Mr. Subramanian says is there's been errors in the method. So it talks about overestimation done through a key methodological change. We will try and get more inputs on that and this big story.